Hello, welcome to the Saratoga Museum Podcast. I'm Museum Director Justin Horn. Join me as we explore the history of southern Wyoming's Platte River Valley, Carbon County, and wider Wyoming. The Saratoga Museum Podcast is a production of the Saratoga Historical and Cultural Association. Thank you for listening. So, what's the best way to avoid confusion when it comes to naming things? Just name everything Laramie. At least, that's what it seems like they did in southeast Wyoming. It all started in 1820 with French fur trader Jacques Laramie. Jacques went up a river in the Rocky Mountains and was never seen alive again. The next spring, his colleagues found his body on the banks of a river. Was he attacked by Arapaho Indians? Killed by rival fur traders? Or did he just slip, fall on the ice, and die of exposure? We may never know. But in his honor, they named the river after him, the Laramie, or, as it quickly became Americanized to, the Laramie. Now the Laramie River begins in what is now Colorado, but flows northward into modern Wyoming. It flows around a mountain range that originally was called the Black Hills. But that's not to be confused with South Dakota's Black Hills. But it was confusing, so they renamed the mountain range the Laramies. The tallest peak in the Laramies is visible for over 100 miles away on the plains. So early travelers on the Oregon Trail, they naturally thought it must be the tallest mountain on the continent. Not quite. Laramie Peak is only 10,200 feet tall, but it's still a good-looking mountain. At the base of Laramie Peak and the confluence of the Laramie and North Platte rivers, fur trader William Sublette built a trading post in 1834. He named it Fort William. Only problem was, the year before, he had built a temporary trading post on the Missouri, also called Fort William. So, to avoid confusion, people took to calling the new one Fort William on the Laramie. A few years later, the American Fur Company took over, and they built a new structure on the site they named Fort John, after John Sarpy. But, because of the name change, people took to calling it the Fort on the Laramie. Soon thereafter, in 1849, the United States Army took over and made it official, calling the post Fort Laramie. The Army ran Fort Laramie until 1890, and then closed the post and it fell to civilian control. A few years later, the railroad built tracks north of the Platte River, about 3 miles away from the fort. So the few townspeople there were, they took to building houses near the railroad tracks on the other side of the Platte, abandoning the post, and springing up the modern-day town of Fort Laramie. The historic military post fell under National Park Service control in the 1930s and has been a National Historic Site ever since, with thousands of visitors traveling to see the historic post. You may have been one of those travelers, and you may have been one of the few who get confused and think that going to Fort Laramie is near Laramie City. Also on the banks of the Laramie River, Laramie City sits over 100 miles upstream. Soon after its founding, it dropped the name city and just became Laramie, and is home to the University of Wyoming. Go Pokes! To make matters even worse, none of the Laramies I mentioned are in Laramie County, Wyoming. Laramie County sits in the very southeast corner of the state, with Cheyenne, the state capital, also serving as county seat. In Laramie County's defense, it did used to make more sense. Back in 1890, when Wyoming gained statehood, Laramie County stretched all the way up to the Montana border. But as the population of Wyoming slowly grew, it got chipped away to form parts of modern-day Weston, Crook, Goshen, Platte, and Niobrara counties. So, to avoid confusion in southeast Wyoming, they just named everything Laramie.